Voces Latinos, 1610 AM. A drink of water with Joyce Aldrich. Refresh your mind.
Welcome to this edition of A Drink of Water, and it's a cool 7 degrees, 8:01 here at CHHA 1610 AM. And this evening, I don't know, maybe you guys have had a chance to stand in those lineups for cannabis, and maybe you've never tried it before, and you just have had a week under your belt, I don't know, and certainly not going to become addicted to it very quickly, because you know what? There's none left in the province, apparently. But tonight we have from JACS, Jewish Addiction Community Services, we have the Director of Outreach and Education and Canadian Certified Addiction Counselor, David Kaufman, in studio, and we're going to be talking about cannabis and addiction and what they do at JACS and how they can help you. We'll be right back. After this, we're going to hear a little song by Lorraine Segato, called Hole in the Wall, and this is from Songs from the Lowdown.
Joey roams the streets. He's so young and already knows defeat. Looking for some comfort from the scorching heat. Some kind of hole in the wall. Mary looks for love, something more than what a tiny world's made of. Skybreakers, expectations aren't enough. Some kind of hole in the wall. This hole in the wall. Everyone needs a place, a comfort from the storms that come our way. A magical hideaway, refuge from the tensions of go. There are mysteries still waiting to be known. Walking by we see, but we don't hear the call. There's a crack, there's a hole in the wall. When you go inside, children laughing, all so beautiful and wild. They are calling us from all around the world. Look for that hole in the wall. Everyone needs a place, a comfort from the storms that come our way. A magical hideaway, a refuge from the tensions of the fall. a place to fall. Hey, yeah. A hole in the wall. Hole in the wall. Everyone needs hole in the wall.
And that's Lorraine Segato from Songs from the Lowdown. That's Hole in the Wall. And that was a wonderful CD that was released a few years ago. And these people are people who are wonderful musicians, who are street musicians, and a lot of them are homeless. And certainly a lot of people who are on the streets do face addiction problems, and not even initially, because as we know, a lot of people go on the streets just to get away from bad situations, especially young people. So we have to have a heart for them and say, you know what, they don't start out addicted. Anyway, we're here tonight with someone who's going to be able to talk about this a lot better than I can, that's for sure. We have David Kaufman in studio, and like I said before, he's the Director of Outreach and Education for JACS, and that's the Jewish Addiction Community Services. And of course, you don't have to be Jewish to go there. There's no demographic, right, to addiction. Is that right, David?
Right, we say addiction doesn't discriminate, neither do we.
There you go. So let's talk about, you know, a lot of people. Let's talk about the most popular conversation right now in the world. Actually, not just in Canada and not just in our province or our city, because the whole world is talking about Canada now. They're calling us cannabis.
Right.
You know, and we've had a lot of people who've had that chance to maybe, you know, stand in those lines around the block in front of those cannabis shops and get their little bit of marijuana and try it this week. And maybe they never tried it before. Maybe they're regular users, and maybe they're, you know, whatever reason it is. Like I said before, there's absolutely no supply apparently left. So addiction may not happen right away, but addiction does happen with cannabis, does it not, David? 100%.
Yeah.
So
people usually can think about addiction in terms of withdrawal and the dangers involved. So it is true that, you know, people who are alcoholics and stop using alcohol cold turkey, all of a sudden, about a third of them could actually die from the withdrawal process, and that doesn't happen with marijuana.
Okay,
right?
That's a terrible stat about alcoholics.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It's very dangerous, so it has to be tapered down. There's a process, there's a medical intervention. So marijuana doesn't have that, so people think, oh, it's safe. You know, we run every Sunday at JACS, which is 846 or 858 Shepherd Avenue West.
It's in the hood.
Yeah, it's very close. We run a men's group, and there's a man there who has 2 years sobriety in terms of using marijuana. He says he thinks the most dangerous thing about cannabis is people don't think it's dangerous.
And I you know, and there are a lot of, you know, research studies, wherever those are research studies are coming from, whether it's pseudoscience or real science, I don't know, saying that there's a lot of health benefits to cannabis and everything. But really, if people did try that cannabis this week, and maybe they were maybe like me, who tried a little bit in the 70s, you know, the Acapulco Gold, which was about, 3 or 4% THC, this stuff that's coming out now,
30%.
Yeah, hello. So they may have went, whoa, you know, what was that I just smoked, you know? Like, that doesn't feel like what I had in the 70s, you know?
Well,
so,
it becomes an hallucinogen at that level. There's quite a dangers associated with it. Look, you know, JACS, we don't have a policy pro or con. We just say, you know, you have to educate yourself.
Just the facts, man.
You have to know what you're dealing with, right? Here are the possible benefits. Here are the dangers.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're doing. And if you choose to use it, we do have guidelines. I mean, one of the things is, just as people use alcohol, use it in an intelligent manner. Like
a harm reduction kind of thing.
Harm reduction,
yeah,
100%. And I you know, warn people, especially, you know, the 60s generation who are starting to play with it again, if that's their you know, thing. I tell them, take one puff, wait 10-15 minutes, take another puff. Wait 10-15 minutes and do it again, because it is very high. I just actually heard a story this evening of a woman who, grandmother, who went to her exercise class, came home, and decided to have a cookie that was in the refrigerator, not knowing that it was baked with marijuana. had to go to the hospital because she thought she was having a stroke. She had hallucinations.
Oh, that's
It was
terrible.
a terrifying experience,
Yeah.
right? And so we're not dealing with, when I was smoking, it was 3-6%.
That's
It's a
right.
totally different
That's
drug.
right. It was just a buzz.
Yeah.
But still addictive, was it not back then? Or?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So no matter what percentage the THC is, what if they remove the THC? Does that make it less addictive? What makes it addictive?
So some people are using it medicinally. The CBD, which is the other component. Well, there are many components, but it's one of the major components.
Right.
Which has to do. They're saying has to do with reducing inflammation and certain types of pain. The research is really spotty. There is no really long, longitudinal studies about marijuana and its effectiveness. I mean, I have with me. I was actually doing some research today in one of the medical journals. So that there really is no evidence to say that it's beneficial. There are anecdotal evidence. People talk about stories, but that's with everything.
Yeah, and yet there are people who will say up and down, no. Probably maybe people screaming at the radio right now saying, no, it's not. There is a medical component. It is pain relief for sure. But at the same at the talk I heard you at where Dr. Michael Kersner was there, and he was mentioning at Baycrest, when all else fails, and I shouldn't really quote him exactly. This is me. This is me quote. This is third party here. But basically, that when they had they had no more pain relief that they could give someone, say, okay, well, we'll try cannabis.
Well,
medical, and then people would find that they're falling in 6 months.
There's been something they've been using, Marinol, which was a synthetic THC they've been using for a number of years.
Oh, okay.
And it's not to say that it's a drug. All drugs carry with them, pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
You have to know if you're going to do it. You have to know what you're getting involved with.
Right.
I mean, I think the debate is even distracting from the real issues that concern us. JACS, we work on the front line. We're dealing with people who are struggling.
Yes.
We know that statistically, that about 9% of people who start using, especially teens, actually it's young, more than that, 9% of people start using marijuana will become addicted to it, have some form of abusive behavior with it. That turns to 17% if they start using when they are in their teens. So it's considerable.
And the brain does not completely form. We know this is scientific fact until the age of 25.
Right.
You're completely developed. You're still growing till you're 25, and after that it's all downhill. But that's when the brain is still growing and developing. So that would be affecting receptors, I believe.
Well, even the College of Physicians in Ontario recommended not using it before 25.
Mm-hmm. Yet
for that same person.
And the law here says 18 is 19, same as alcohol.
There are cannabinoid receptors in the brain, and the two places that we are seeing that it affects most is memory and motivation.
So you might end up. So those people are still in the basement, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
at 45, maybe.
As I mentioned in the talk, that it's pretty much every week somebody walks in and says something along the lines, "Well, my life's kind of stuck," and they're in their mid-20s to mid-30s, could even be more. And I always say, "Well, how much are you smoking?" And they look at me like, "How did I know?" Because that's the drug that does it. See, with alcohol or cocaine or other drugs, it's a dramatic finish. You get caught driving, you get into a fight, your behavior is extremely erratic.
Yeah.
So everyone it's more likely that people will say, hey, you've got a problem, let's deal with this.
Right.
But with marijuana, you smoke it, and what do? You order more pizza.
Yeah, or like those poor cops this summer who tried the gummy bears. One ended up a tree, and the other one very paranoid and asking for backup and help. That was scary. Yeah. And the gummy bear thing is very, very scary. We're going to go to break because it's 8:15 coming up. But when we come back, we've got lots to talk about, and we're going to talk about what JACS does about with helping people with addiction and outreach in general. And you got events, all kinds of good stuff and groups. We're going to talk about when we come back after break. Here at CHHA 1610 AM, I'm Joyce Aldrich, and you're listening to A Drink of Water.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A Drink of Water.
And we're here with David Kaufman from JACS. And if you want to go to the website, I encourage you to do so now. If you're near your computer, your phone, go to JACS, that's JACS, JACStoronto.org, JACStoronto.org. And you're going to come to a great website. It's got all kinds of stuff there and what they do, their meetings, how to contact them, how to support them. Events, they've got a comedy night coming up actually in November, I believe, and all kinds of things, and how to subscribe to get more information as well, and a great resources page, all there. And you know, David, there's a spiritual aspect to healing as well, and you can be powerful, you can be strong, and you don't have to have the drugs or the booze or whatever you're addicted to, gambling, because you cover the whole gambit there, JACS, don't
Right.
you? Really?
Because drugs, people think drugs are drug specific. It's really about escape. It's about not being able to face life on life's terms of pain, trying to quiet the voices in our head. That I'm not talking schizophrenic voices.
No,
I'm just
no.
The voices of fear of rejection, fear of failure,
Tell you
fear
you're
of the unknown,
terrible,
fear of pain,
and yeah,
all that
kinds of stuff. Yeah. So how do you approach your therapy, your addiction therapy there at JACS?
Well, you know, it's interesting because you're mentioning about it's very common that after the first session, the person will, you know, get up and sort of stop at the door, turn around and say, hey, you know what? We just spent the whole session and we barely talked about drugs.
Ah,
And I say, because drugs are not your problem, they're a failed solution.
right. Coping mechanism for whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated because we talk about drug addiction being a disease, right? And that's a whole discussion. It looks like a behavior. I mean, the symptoms of diabetes, of a disease of the pancreas, are blurry vision, frequent urination, cuts that don't heal.
Right.
And that's, you know, you can't blame somebody for that. But
No.
when somebody's an addict and they're struggling with addiction, the symptoms of addiction are bad behavior, lying, doing things that are obsessive. I mean, it's self-destruction and hurting others many times too in the process.
And that's what people focus on rather than why that's happening.
That's right.
The undercurrent, that deep undercurrent, and that happens with any kind of mental illness as well.
That's right.
People who are, and that's why the stigma. There's so much stigma around it, whether it's addiction or mental health, and all of that is integrated as well. Because people who have mental health issues often, you know, coping mechanisms, because the drugs don't always work, you know, the antidepressants or whatever, and sometimes there are no drugs for some illnesses. And also people are in really a lot of physical pain as well, and they just need to, they go to the fentanyl or all of the different, the pain relievers that they're addicted to, the prescription drugs. So somebody comes into you said the first session, you don't even really talk about the actual addiction. How do you approach someone when they come in?
Well, it depends.
You know, how they approach
Depends
you.
on many factors, but
Yeah.
many times one of the questions I'll ask at the beginning, after doing an intake, because you have to know what's bringing them there.
Sure.
Many times I'll ask them, you know, when you leave here in an hour, how would you know our session has been useful?
Oh,
Right? Because
Good
I want to
question.
also get there. I want to also understand what is their definition of healing or health, or mental health. And so that's also definitely a focus. And you discover that many, I mean, there's, as I said before, there's all types of ways people come into addiction.
Right.
I've heard people tell me, you know, I was 13 years old, I was at a bar mitzvah, and I had my first drink, and that was it. It was like, wow, this is amazing stuff.
yeah.
And that was like already, and we know there's a predisposition for addiction.
Yeah. How do you know?
Well, we see statistically that
Genetically,
if you have
or-
a parent that's struggling with addiction, you have an 8 times more likelihood of having it yourself.
Oh.
Add a grandparent to that mix, you can double that, right? So there's definitely a genetic component to addiction, and
Kind of in the DNA.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So-
then there's coping mechanisms. I mean, when people have difficult lives and trauma, and you smoke the substance, you inject the substance, or you take the pill and suddenly it disappears, well, that's quite a motivating factor. And so a lot of what addiction counseling is really about is about learning how to live on life's terms. You know? I mentioned before, one of my concerns, you know, one of the concerns we have about marijuana is how it slowly affects a person.
It's insidious.
Yeah, and you know, I'll tell a story. Many years ago, I had a client who started using when he was 18 years old. Started using drugs, and when he was 28, he came to us, and within about 3-4 months, he was not using drugs anymore. And he said he wanted to start dating, I said, well, I think you need to wait a little, whatever. But he decided to go out on a date, and he came back the next week, and he said, you know what? She said, you're really sweet, but you're an 18-year-old in a 28-year-old body.
Ooh.
And so what the woman had seen and what we see, what counseling is often about, is that drugs stop the maturation process. Intellectually and emotionally, a person often just freezes the time that they started using. And how does this work? So imagine,
bizarre, actually.
What's that?
That's bizarre, isn't it? When you think about it, you don't think about that kind of thing. You don't think of it.
And so what happens is, imagine you're 17 years old, and you have your first heartbreak, right? And it's really painful. And you go and you speak to your parents, you speak to your friends. You have to deal with it, and you have to process this emotion. But after the whole thing's over, you've learned how to deal with really difficult emotions, right? Or you have a test in school and you're anxious about it, and you've got to go through it, and maybe you fail, and then you learn how to so on. Or you have a business presentation, in the same sort of situation.
Sure.
You have to go through life's difficulties, and that's what matures us.
Life happens.
But if you're 17 years old and you have your first heartbreak or that test, and you have the opportunity, or you turn to a drug, what happens is you don't have to experience that heartbreak. You don't have to process that. And what happens is years and years go by of life experiences that you've never really had to mature with.
Right.
And so suddenly you wake up one day, because you're not using one, hopefully, and you're still 18 years old. And you've never learned life lessons. And so, as I said before, a lot of counseling is learning how to live life on life's terms without the drug.
That's very stuck.
Yeah. I remember once a man came, he had been sober about a year, and he came, he said, David, I just broke up with whatever her name was, right? And he said, and I've got this pain, and he's like pointing to his chest. And he said, and what is this? And I said, you remember all those rock and roll songs about heartbreak?
Yes.
He said, that's it. And he was like, wow, I've never had an experience in life like this before.
And that's what you had to deal with it.
Yeah. And then you grow up, right? And so this is one of my major concerns about marijuana, or all drugs, but especially marijuana, is that you slow down. And you have these kids who are 25 years old, they're in their parents' house in the basement, they're playing video games, they're not going on with life, and they're smoking or using drugs, and they get stuck. Right?
So we got to unstick a lot of people and show them how to get out of it. So
one of the ways we do that is obviously individual counseling, but we have for example, at JACS on Sundays at 12 o'clock, we have a men's group that meets for 2 hours. And in that group, people share their experiences, their strength, their hope. And we go through, we teach people how to process these emotions and learn how to live life in life's terms again.
And men,
it's very wonderful work. It's very exciting when you see somebody, the light comes back in their eyes. It's wonderful.
And men are taught to suppress their emotions as well. We're going to go to break in a couple of a few seconds, but I want to talk more about that, because that's fascinating, and that group and the other groups that you have as well. But we're going to be playing a song when we come out of break, and it's Marianne Epp, and it actually speaks to that whole idea of the Peter Pan man, which is really that sort of a Peter Pan syndrome, like the land of the lost boys. And we'll be playing a song right after a break by Marianne Epp called Big Words. So we're going to go to break right now. We'll be back with more of David Kaufman from JACS. I'm Joyce Aldridge. You're listening to A Drink of Water, and it is 8:28.
CHHA 1610 AM, Radio Voces Latinas, the first and only Hispanic radio station in Canada, from Toronto to the world.
From Toronto, Canada, CHHA 1610 AM, the voice of our community, because we are a part of your daily life.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM, A Drink of Water.
I'm gonna tell you the big words. I know you don't want to hear them. I'm gonna say them anyway, 'cause I really like myself. It's only 'cause I care. Don't wanna waste my time. I'm gonna tell you the big words. has gotta go. 'Cause what I need is a man, one who lets me be myself, one who has a plan. It's only 'cause I care, don't wanna waste my time. I'm gonna tell you the big words, and I promise you'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. I promise you'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. 'Cause all these voices I was hearing that always stopped me from myself, now I'm facing all my demons, making friends and nothing else. So now I'm free of years of shackles that have held me hard and long. Love's exploding from inside of me. Well, who knew I could be strong? I'm gonna tell you the big words, like I'm talking to myself. I'm gonna gather up my faith, gonna ask when I need help. So I need you to be real, and I'm gonna hold the line. I'm gonna tell you the big words, and I promise I'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. I promise you'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. I promise you're still mine. Bye, 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 bye. I promise I'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. Yes, I promise I'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. Yes, I promise I'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. And I promise you're still mine. Bye, 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 bye. I promise I'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. Yes, I promise I'll be fine. Bye, 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 bye. Yes, I promise I'll be fine.
And that's Marianne App. Big words, the big words we need to talk to ourselves about a little bit. Yeah. Oh, that's Marianne App. Sometimes it's good to play right to the end. That was not me. Anyway, if you've just tuned in, I'm here with the Director of Outreach and Education, who is a Canadian Certified Addiction Counselor, David Kaufman from JACS Toronto, jacstoronto.org. Please go to that website and see what they do. They do a lot of great things. It's the Jewish Addiction Counseling Services. You don't have to be Jewish to go, because addiction doesn't discriminate. And I'm just looking here, we're talking a little bit before we went to break about how people have to find themselves, really, to not just find themselves, but to get unstuck. If there are those people who are sitting in there, if you're sitting in your parents' basement right now, listen up. We want to get you unstuck. So I'm looking at this What About Me support group, because I'm looking at that and I thought, I wish I had something like that to go to when I was 16. I'm 63 now, but we didn't have stuff like that back then, because I'm an adult child of alcoholics and mental health issues all over the place, and I see these little bubbles here, there's no real quiet, safe place in our house. That was for sure. I'm anxious about my future. I feel alone. No one understands what it is like to live like this. I can't believe this is my life. I'm tired of the empty promises that things will get better. I feel like no one really has my back. And kids can't feel like that in a house. And a lot of kids end up on the street too. I've been playing songs in the lowdown. A lot of those people were on the street when they were very, very young. The average age for a child on the street is actually 11 years old, which is really shocking. That's here in Toronto. That's not in Bangladesh. And so, how do we make those kids feel secure at home so they don't end up on the street and then become addicted?
Yeah, you're talking. That group is actually what we call for the other children.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
that too. Yeah.
So what happens is people ask us. Well, they'll say, "Well, how successful are you?"
Mm-hmm.
And I say, "What you're really probably asking is how many people who come in addicted to substance A, B, or C,
right,
when they leave are no longer addicted." But I say that's one type of measurement. The other is the families, and we go. Collateral damage is quite profound in a
Horrible.
family where there's one child or spouse that is the center of drama. They walk. I mean, we talk about they walk in the room and they suck out the emotional oxygen of the room, leaving everyone gasping because there's no place for them.
Yeah.
Much of the resources of the family, the emotional and the physical and financial resources are trying to fix the addict. And the other kids, because they're not, it's like a triage situation, because they're not having such problems, the parents say, well, okay, he or she is okay. I remember, and parents are often oblivious to this or aware of it slightly.
Well, they become the fixer too,
What's that?
They try to fix it too because they feel like somebody's got to do something, and they become that person who's always trying to make it right.
Right. Well, that's and the parents often become the codependents.
Yes, codependency.
Their job is they see themselves at their own sacrifice and everyone else's sacrifice to save the addict.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We talk about something called the 3 C's or the 4 C's.
Okay.
That I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I can't cure the addict. But I can contribute to their healing and their self-destruction. And so where the parents or their loved ones have power is in that contribute, that 4th C. Right. Whether they're going to contribute, giving financially, rescuing them. Some of the worst things that happen is somebody gets a DUI, they're put into jail, and the parents come running and bail them out of jail.
Instead of leaving there to chill.
Well, it's not even chilling. It's facing the consequences. Like
the heartbreak.
Yeah, I remember once that we had a situation where we said, "Please leave them in jail," right? And they immediately bailed them out. And as they're walking out of the court area, the child turns to the mother and says, "Well, I was with somebody and they told me to make a right-hand turn, and that's why I drove down the one-way street," right? Because the amount of denial that's going on. To admit that you have a problem is really difficult, right? And so the addict's in denial, and the parents are saving the addict from the consequences. And these children, the other children, are suffering because nobody's paying attention, or a little bit.
Yeah. When does that group meet?
I think we are restarting the group in the next while.
So people go to JACSToronto.org, they'll find out when that's going to start up again. That's a wonderful group because, whether parents or siblings, they need that support. I mean, so if you're listening now and you have someone in your home and you're feeling exactly like that, The
group we have called Here to Help, it's a Thursday night group.
And that's on now?
That's ongoing right now.
Okay.
And
when
starts
does that
Thursday
start?
night at 7:30
Okay.
at 846B Shepherd Avenue West.
Mm-hmm.
And that is for parents and siblings also. And there they come to learn how to deal with the issues that are. It's a very practical group.
Sure.
It's a how-to focus.
Well, sometimes you need those ABCs, before you, and 1, 2, 3s before you can do anything else. I mean, and sometimes it's hard to have that empathy for that person because when you're so close in a family, you can hate your family a whole lot better than you can hate a stranger, It's so much easier to get embroiled in that kind of drama as well, to be there and just want to just run and leave or get angry or say, it's all your fault, you're ruining our family and it's because of you, and that kind of thing. So that's the contributing, whether you're going to contribute in a positive way. It's hard to do that sometimes.
So we speak a lot about self-care. in a family. First, we talk about stop contributing to the problem,
Yeah.
then participate in the self-destruction of the person struggling with addiction.
Sure.
But also self-care. What do you need to do to protect yourself? What do you need to do to nurture yourself to grow again? And it's very difficult. It's hard because when you're worrying and you're anxious about it. So that's a process, and that's something that the groups are really wonderful at, because you sit with 25 other people in a room, and they're all sharing their stories. Been there, done that, learned. Let me teach you what I've learned. It's a wonderful experience. I know it's very hard to walk in the first time.
Yeah.
It's really, I say, for a few minutes of discomfort, you'll gain a lifetime of support.
Well, it's like giving you the space that you don't have at home. It gives you that breath. And I'm a big proponent of support groups. Haven't gone since I was so long.
Yeah, it's an amazing
but
experience.
it is important to have that support and to reach out and to talk to someone like the people at JACS.
Yeah. And people often lament after they've come. They say, "Wish they've done this many years ago."
Yeah, and but the shoulda, woulda, couldas.
Right.
We can't beat ourselves up over that.
100%.
But we do because we're human, and we naturally want to think the worst of ourselves sometimes, but really it's not like that. So you have so what other meetings do you have? You have the concerned persons group. What about
that's
me?
That's a more advanced group for once people have gone through the Here to Help, and they're in a sort of a maintenance phase. They would often transition to that group.
Okay. All right, and I'm just looking at everything, and you've got the Here to Help group, which we just spoke about.
There's a teenage group, a young adult
The teen group, yeah.
That's on Thursday nights also at, I think, 7:30 or 7:45. And that's also a wonderful group for young adults to come and talk about, there's no pressure. We have a phrase that we meet the person where they're at, not where we want them to be. Right? And so if somebody comes and they say, listen, I want to use, but I want to use in a way that doesn't, cause me problems. So we'll help them work with that.
Well, that's the harm reduction aspect of things.
And truth is, many times people will come in, they'll start the harm reduction process, taste how good it is not to be out of control of your life and be feeling like competence, and then they decide to go, to be over it. There are also those who don't and stay in the harm reduction model.
Well, I worked at Queen West Community Health at the front line, giving out STEM kits and injection kits and to people. And I remember this one fellow came up to me. He was coming in for his STEM kits for crack, all the time. And then one day he came in to get it. He says, you know what? I'm only using once a day. And it was having us there, giving him non-judgmentally, what he needed, clean, that he could use. And then eventually I'd also have other people say, I'm going to be moving out of this area because this is the area where I use, and they just open up to us. And it was just because we were there to support them with not just STEM kits, but also socks and toothpaste and toothbrush, everything they needed, just to give them that kind of support. Even that really helps people to just feel like, I'm not the terrible names that people call people who are addicted, and the people. They're children of God, That's it.
Some of the other work that we're doing is we are going into schools. Okay. And I say it's really some of the best work we do, and you'll never know about it. You'll never see it. There are studies in the States, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, that have been tracking the correlation between education and use and abuse since the 70s. And so we see there's anywhere from a 26 to 50% decrease in use and abuse or children who are educated about drug use. Right? And so what we're doing, JACS, is we are sending 2 or 3 of our therapists into schools to talk to the kids, high school kids, young elementary school kids, about drugs.
Wonderful. Yeah. And now especially, they're often approached in the schoolyards and outside, and elementary school children, not just high school kids. Those little dots or whatever, they were a dot of drugs on a little, they looked like cap gun kind of things. That was a problem for a long time. And now with the gummy bears, oh my gosh, that is very frightening, because they say, there's going to be a stamp on it. Right, like that 2-year-old who recently ingested them and had to be rushed to hospital. That was when? That was not long ago. Boy, I'm so glad that you are in the business you're in. how did people do? You have volunteers, helpers? Do you have people? If people want to get involved with JACS, or
it's
how
a
do
little
they do
difficult
it?
because we have issues of anonymity. We don't want people wandering in and seeing other people. That is one of the most important foundations of recovery. Is somebody
Yes.
knows they can come to JACS and they're safe. What
Right.
they say, who they see there, it remains there.
Yeah. But there is a support JACS tab on
100%.
your. Now that you can doubt. It's 8:45. We're going to go against break. The hour just flies by, and we'll be back right after these messages with David Kaufman from JACS. Go to jaxtoronto.org, and we'll be back right after this.
You are listening to Radio Voces Latinas, 1610 AM. A drink of water.
Yeah, you're listening to A Drink of Water. I'm Joyce Aldrich. I'm here with David Kaufman from JACS, and we've been having a really great conversation this evening, David, about all of the, cannabis and how you approach addiction at JACS, and how you meet people where they're at. I think that's very important. I think it's important in life that whether when we see people, we just meet them where they're at, and not the expectation thing and trying to read things into stuff and everything. It causes a lot of problems, doesn't it, really? We've discussed a lot. We've discussed the groups and how to get in touch with you, which is at jaxtoronto.org. That's JACS Toronto.org. And that anybody can walk through your door and feel...
100%. We have between 500 and 700 people walking through the doors of JACS every week.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. We also host 12-step programs there.
Yeah, oh, good.
So Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. We have a lot of different groups going on.
And your address again is?
So there's two storefronts on the same plaza.
Mm-hmm.
It's 858 Shepherd Avenue West. That's the offices for the therapy. And
Right.
846B is where the support groups are being held.
And what intersection is that?
Willington and Shepherd Avenue West.
So they can either go up to Downsview on the subway or along that Shepherd West, and take the Shepherd West bus
there's a
to
bus
you.
that stops right across the street.
And drops them right off there at
Yeah.
JACS. Okay, this is wonderful, and the whole thing, moving forward, has society changed since this marijuana legislation, this cannabis legislation? I'm not asking you to be a prophet or a fortune teller or anything, but given your experience, what thinkst thou?
Well, I wish I would know. I mean, our concerns are things I mentioned earlier in the program, which is that young people are going to have access to it in an easier manner. The fact that they can't have it before there were some studies done where they asked people before legalization, they asked young adults, would they smoke? Why don't they smoke? They say because it's illegal. But the same children said if it was legal, they would smoke. Now, it had nothing to do with age or whether, what age you can smoke or not.
Well, you see by the
19 was
lineups
irrelevant
outside
then.
the shops this last week.
No, but just like alcohol, once it's accessible, it's accessible.
Yeah.
The fact that it's 19 is not going to stop many kids who want to, experiment.
Same with cigarette smoking or anything like that. That's illegal at
E-cigarettes are a big item now for young adults.
What kind of
e-cigarettes?
Oh, those are the vape.
Yes. Well, there's vaping. So there's nicotine vaping, right? And the marijuana vaping is a different process. Instead of burning the leaf, what happens is you heat up the leaf, and the oils on the leaf, the THC is released. So
that sounds very potent.
Well, it is, and technically it's a bit safer in terms of the carcinogens that are inside the leaf.
Now, there's another thing to think about.
In terms of the THC, it's quite
powerful. Yeah, especially when it's now 30%. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
30% as opposed to what we were used. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't smoking up all the time, but I tried it a few times, and it was mild to me, but not anymore. I wouldn't try it. I'd be afraid to be paranoid, to be honest. Yeah. I'd be afraid that something would get tripped.
Yeah, I know quite a few nurses who are telling us that in the hospitals they have kids coming in, young adults coming in, and they're overdosed and having psychosis, where they're seeing things and hearing things and just sort of out of their mind in a way, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And it's frightening for everyone involved. most of the time it goes back, but there are cases where it sort of stays stuck in that way, and that's terrible.
That is terrible. It's especially, like I said, the brain is developing until age 25. So if you have something, and you talked about how people can be stuck at 18, with that heartbreak or whatever happens, whatever trauma, whatever thing happens to them in life, they don't deal with it, but they use drugs or alcohol. Even I guess that would have a similar effect.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, they numb the pain and numb your life. And life is so precious, and we're given this life to do something. And I wouldn't want anybody to lose out on the wonderful opportunities that are placed before us. Don't miss out. Don't be that girl interrupted. That was about a borderline, but the whole idea is that don't interrupt your life, because it's really hard to pick it up again. It really is, unless you have some really great counseling.
And I also want to caution. I mean, so we have sometimes somebody will call in and they'll say, I just found out my daughter smoked a joint a month ago, and they're in panic, thinking this is the beginning of addiction. In the vast majority of cases, it's not, and they're experimenting.
Yeah.
But it is important to, instead of being judgmental and angry and the whole punishment.
Right.
It's better to have a conversation and ask them, what's going on, and you might discover. I mean, as we've, numerous times it happens. Well, somebody will say, "Well, the reason I'm smoking is because I feel anxious and it helps me, relax." So then it's a call to ask the question. Well, so tell me about this anxiety you're having. Would you like to speak to somebody who can help you with?
Sure.
Instead of going into the whole judgment and the anger about the weed, because the weed is a symptom of another problem that's happening in their life.
Exactly, and they could become a shopaholic instead of smoking weed, or a gambler, like you said, all the different things, or sex. All kinds of things can happen to a person, and does.
So it is important to teach them coping mechanisms, how to deal with those voices that we all have and the fears that we all struggle with. Right?
Well, a lot of, we're coming up to the end of our program, but mindfulness is something that people are talking about a lot. And also dialectical behavioral therapy, although it's been used a lot for people with borderline PTSD. Right. The skills are basic skills, and especially for people who are stuck, wherever they're stuck. So you got to find a way to learn the things that you didn't learn as a kid and become an adult. So last words, 8:54, we're going to be going out in about 3 minutes there.
Often people will call and they'll say something along the lines, "You're my last hope. You're my last," and we silently sort of think, "I wish we were the first call."
Yeah.
We say people call often to JACS and they're in a 911 situation. They're in crisis. We will of course deal with it because that's what we do. But if somebody's listening and they think they might have a problem, it's much better that they be a 411 call.
I was just going to say, the 411.
Yeah, call up, find out some information, come into one of the groups. You'll learn so much just by sitting in a group and hearing other people speak, and you'll get a better perspective and education about what is important, what's not important to know and to do.
And you understand that it can be difficult to walk through those doors,
100%.
but that once they do, they'll feel supported.
Yeah, it's such a relief to know that you're not alone. People really feel that they're the only ones that are struggling with this, and the stigma of addiction, the stigma, and the shame involved, and it's really, it's a story that we tell ourselves about our lives and what other people, and that's one of the fears we have of what people are saying.
Oh yeah, what are people going to think? Well, what are people going to think anyway? I mean, if you're stoned all the time, or you're drunk or whatever, or you got a closet full of clothes with tags on it that you never use, or you're gambling or whatever it is, people are going to talk anyway. So you might as well get the help you need and get on with your life. I want to thank you, David Kaufman, for coming in from JACS. That's Jewish Addiction Counseling Services. That's jaxtoronto.org, and you don't have to be Jewish to go. And just go in, and you'll meet some wonderful people there who'll lend a hand. So we're going out now, and my name is Joyce Aldridge. You've listened to A Drink of Water.
So good.